Reflections with theologian Father James Bacik, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo.
I think it's the whole business of measuring the worth of people by what they do and accomplish. I think that's clearly part of our society, isn't it?
Yes.
The feeling that the status you've achieved and the accomplishments you have, that's what signifies your worth. That's how, since we know that we're worthwhile. I think we'd have to say in our culture we're certainly out of balance on that.
Joining Father Bacik in today's Reflections is Sue Dwyer, freelance writer from Toledo. Today, Father Bacik and Sue Dwyer discuss Advent and John the Baptist. Now, here's Father Bacik.
Sue, I'm glad to have the chance to talk with you. Now, we've had some interesting conversations in the past, and I think it'd be nice to talk some more now. And you write so well, and I enjoy your stuff so much. I thought it would be nice to have you on the program and to chit-chat a little bit about the season of Advent. Are you trying to get into Advent this year yourself? Are you taking this season seriously and trying to get something out of it?
Yes, I am, and I'm finding it, as always, difficult to battle the more commercial aspects of Christmas and the kind of frantic busyness that it's easy to get into.
I guess we all have that kind of problem. And so I guess what we need to do is to figure out our own ways of trying to buck that season to some degree. You found any yourself that are working for you or that you're trying to work on during this Advent season?
Well, I made up a little Advent prayer that I try to remember to say each day, which just brings me back to a more spiritual reality, I guess.
I think many people are finding that the importance of the prayer during Advent. I guess a lot of us have the problem of getting it in the midst of the busyness and so on. It's often difficult to find the time. I think especially during the season, it's all the business is intensified and seems like even a harder time to pray. I know I wrote an article suggesting that during Advent maybe we had to take it a little easy, not put too much guilt on ourselves for not getting our prayer life in. But on the other hand, I know there are some people who during this time really do think of it as a time of spiritual growth, of greater meditation and reflection. And I myself like the season. I think the liturgies are nice. I think there's interesting symbolism connected with it. I think that one can make a lot out of it. And I'd like to talk a little bit maybe about the figure of John the Baptist as an example of the Advent season. Does that figure intrigue you at all, John the Baptist? No, I'm thinking of him in literary terms, and I like the way your sense of developing character and so on. You ever tried to crawl behind the eyes of John the Baptist? You got any ideas of what kind of a person he was and so on?
Well, I think he must have struck people as being eccentric, and certainly he was not a quiet person. He called attention to himself in various ways. I think he was the kind of person who probably would not have been able to remain in the background even had he wanted to. People found him striking, and
Right, maybe I could pick up on that eccentric notion there, because he was a little strange in some ways, wasn't he? When the Gospels present him to us, he's out there in the desert eating grasshoppers and wearing rough clothes and so on. A figure that is strange in any time, I guess. I would say an ascetical figure, a person of great discipline in his life, apparently, and eating simple food, and really, I suppose, not understood by other people. It's interesting to compare him to the Qumran community. The Dead Sea Scrolls. You've heard of those, and they found those back in the 1940s and found out about this whole community that they called the Essenes that lived at Qumran in the caves. They were an offshoot of Judaism, and they had a lot of ascetical practices themselves. In fact, they had the practice of water ablution, something that would be close to what we know as baptism. So that there's often been thought that maybe John the Baptist had some connection with those Essenes, that he at least knew about them. Some people would go further and say he was a member of the group, but I don't think that would fit in myself. But he was preaching in a location very near to where those caves were, and it would appear as though he would have at least known about those people. But eccentric, huh? That's the word that comes across to you.
Yes.
Strange kind of figure in some ways. The gospel picture, again, is one of the people coming out from Jerusalem and the cities out into the desert area and finding him, encountering his preaching, which was often a very rough, difficult preaching, if you remember. In other words, he would, what was the phrase, you brood of vipers? Was that from him?
I think so.
Yeah, and he's saying that, you people got to shape up. You got to change your ways. You got to repent. Then he would baptize them as a sign of this repentance. But it was difficult with them. He was a no-nonsense type preacher, and I suppose there was certain attraction in that. I think we got the same thing today, don't we? What preachers who get up and or people who call for strong penance or sharp change of life and so on seem to have a strange appeal with people.
Yes, people like the dramatic, and they like to think of a dramatic change in their lives. And I'm sure that's what they must have felt with John's approach.
Yeah, he was, I guess the word we often use for that these days is conversion, that people are called to change their life, turn it around, convert, do a 180, as the young people say today. As we're talking about John the Baptist, I'm thinking back to the beautiful stories about that we find in Luke's Gospel about the angel Gabriel appearing and his father Zechariah and his mother Elizabeth, and Zechariah going dumb because he isn't quite following the call of the Lord exactly. And the fact that John the Baptist is portrayed when he is in the womb of his mother Elizabeth, that he recognizes Mary and Jesus. The babe leapt in my womb is Elizabeth's poetic way of talking about that encounter with Mary. So we see right from the beginning that John the Baptist is a different kind of character. I mean, he's special in some ways. God is at work here. We have that same thing that you find in many of the great figures in the Hebrew Scriptures, that they are conceived in their parents' old age, beyond the childbearing years, and they are especially called by God and named by God. So we would have those stories repeated throughout the Hebrew Scriptures, showing again that we're dealing with an important person, one who Jesus finally is going to call the greatest of the prophets, really.
Right.
I was thinking of another person that he's identified often with is Elijah. There was the feeling among the Hebrews that Elijah would return again at the time of the Messiah when the kingdom would be inaugurated. And so John the Baptist has certain characteristics of Elijah himself. Well, let's. What are we going to learn here from this John the Baptist character? Let me go forward with the story a little bit, and let's see if we can pick up on certain elements of it. Because one of the things that intrigues me about the Baptist is you said that he was up front in a way, that he evidently had charisma about him. He made a splash. He had followers, didn't he? He became a pretty important man. The picture you get is people coming out from the city, sort of crowds, and having disciples and so on. And yet he's called upon to do a much different task. He's really supposed to be preparing for the coming of the Messiah. His own crisis moment, as I see it, one of them at least, comes when he's got all these followers, he's a popular figure and so on, and then Jesus comes to be baptized. And now what is going to happen? And as the Scriptures portray it, John submits at that point, surrenders. He picks up his proper role of being the preparer for Christ. And he says, okay, not me, him. He recedes into the background. He has to become the sort of unimportant figure. Do you want to pick up on that at all, Sue, that whole notion of the unimportance of John the Baptist in that way?
Just that it might have been very difficult for him initially to step into the background. It must have been rather a shock to him, and perhaps it was a relief. You think of people who become prominent in our own day in some way and then are forced into retirement or step aside to let someone else take over, and I'm sure they have that mixture of regret and relief that perhaps John had.
Oh, I find that interesting. A certain sense of relief. I didn't think of it in those terms, but to sort of, what would it be, to have the main pressure off oneself, in a way?
Being that visible has got to put a lot of pressure on one.
especially since he was preaching a message that was unpopular in many ways. I think whenever we get up and speak about something that others don't like, or when we have to stand up for principles and so on, that really that is a difficult matter. I mean, that's an extra pressure. I always find, for example, when I go out and give talks on social justice matters or speak on the bishop's peace pastoral or the economics thing and so on, it always takes more out of me because you know that the audience isn't with you entirely, that a lot of people disagree about this particular message of the social gospel that we're getting these days. I always feel myself drained at that time. I would just guess that the Baptist would have known that same sort of feeling of being fatigued by standing up for something and knowing that people weren't appreciating the message.
Yes. He might have thought at last, I've done it, I've completed that phase of my life at least.
What about the pride notion, though? What about the sense, well, now I'm not in the limelight?
It may have been difficult. It may indeed have been difficult. You see people having a hard time letting go. I'm thinking of a man who has founded an organization that's been quite successful, and he did all the work initially and even contributed financially to its success. And he, after a couple of years, decided that he needed to share the responsibility with others. And he's tried to do that, and he's having a very difficult time. And it's not entirely his fault. The people who worked with him are still depending on him to a great extent. So I think that whole thing of letting go is very difficult.
Yeah, that's a key word, that letting go, isn't it? I mean, we talk a lot about that these days. I use the phrase a lot. I'm not always sure that I know exactly what I mean when I say it. We use the word surrendering. What does that mean to you, if letting go? And I'm not sure myself. I mean, it means that we get ourselves off center stage.
Yes.
I think that we're able to detach maybe from the success or failure of our projects. That we're able, functionally, I suppose it means we're able to go to bed at night and sleep with a clear conscience, or go to bed at night and say, well, I didn't accomplish everything I'd like to, but I'm okay, and I hand it over to God. I put it in God's hands.
And what a relief to discover that one is not indispensable. This is a good feeling, actually.
Yeah, but I think that people who are feeling, though, that they are indispensable maybe don't think of it that way. Don't you think a lot of people are thinking, well, geez, the world won't get along without me, or if I'm not here, I won't be able to, the world won't go on the way it is supposed to.
Well, you think of the most common greeting that you get these days. It seems to me, I notice it a lot lately. People say to you, are you keeping busy? And this seems to be, if you want to say, well, I hope not. But it seems to be vitally important to be occupied with something that's got some significance to it. And if you're not, you're kind of out of it.
Well, I guess that's true. I think it's the whole business of measuring the worth of people by what they do and accomplish. I think that's clearly part of our society, isn't it?
Yes.
The feeling that the status you've achieved and the accomplishments you have, that's what signifies your worth. That's how, since we know that we're worthwhile. I think we'd have to say in our culture we're certainly out of balance on that point. But, your phrase, are you keeping busy? Well, it's almost strange, isn't it? Because almost everyone we know is busy. You're busy writing a novel, right? You're busy just finishing up a novel. You got pages to type. You don't even have time to come here and talk with me on this program. I'll probably ask you to do another program. You'll say, no, I got to get back and type my novel. So, everybody's busy that way. It seems to be the great problem. Every time we're trying to gather people, we were talking on our staff the other day, we're always busy with projects and programs. Some people are saying, well, let's just gather and be, let's just be with one another for a change without having so many programs to worry about and projects.
Yes.
Maybe let's go back to that sense of the unimportance. I've heard you talk about that before. That somehow that seems important to you to say that reduce my own significance. To say that I'm not all that important.
Well, there was a time in my life when I was involved in several community organizations simultaneously, and I was busy, busy, busy. And if I didn't have a meeting one night of the week, then I would join another organization so that I would have a meeting every night of the week. And I suddenly began to realize that the kind of pressure I was under was foolish and was leaving me no time for reflection. And I looked around at all these organizations and I saw that they could get along pretty well without me. And I found that a relief, and so gradually I began to withdraw and do the things I really wanted to do.
Was that also a trauma for you in any way, to let go of all of that?
Well, not really, no. Actually, it was kind of gradual, and all of a sudden one day I looked around and I thought, well, that's a relief.
I'm thinking of some of my workaholic friends that would probably like to hear that kind of advice, because I think the great fear is that if one didn't have all this activity and this work to do, that one would disintegrate.
Oh, I used to find that very frightening. The thought of not having anything to do, not being busy, was very frightening to me.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know.
Is it connected again with the lack of self-worth? If I'm not busy and accomplishing and doing, then I won't be anything. I won't have my own identity, or
possibly.
I won't be a person, the kind of person I thought I was.
And possibly a sense of not knowing who I was, a certain kind of emptiness. And so I identified myself with my activities rather than with what I was.
Yes, and I think there you've probably put your finger on one of the deeper problems of those who find their worth only in doing, is the fear of, who am I exactly, and who would I be, and what sort of emptiness would I find if I wasn't so involved.
Yes.
I pick up on another thing you said there, Sue, about then you were freer to do things you would like to do, which is to write.
Yes.
Correct?
It took me a while to discover that was what I wanted to do.
Do you find that business of being a writer now then to be more fulfilling and...
Much more, yes. I enjoy the creative process very much. What I don't like is the fact that what I write is not always accepted. I receive my share of rejection slips, as all writers do.
I always remember someone told me that when you send in a manuscript and it isn't accepted, you should always have a list of publishers ready so that it's automatically sent to the next one, because it's so deflating when you get that back and the rejection.
Yes. You should always have several things out in the mail at once and try to forget what they are, and then you're pleasantly surprised when you get an acceptance.
When something good comes back,
and you're not crushed if you get a rejection.
Well, I wonder, I don't know, you're portraying the Baptist here in a positive way of saying that he would find a certain relief in this. I guess I put it in terms of crisis, that this was his great challenge in life. Would he end up being egocentric and having too much pride and saying, no, I'm going to hold on to my disciples here, hold on to my group. I wonder if that's a more male way of thinking of it, but that's my own perception of the temptation and crisis he would have. Not so much a relief, good, I'm out of the preaching business now in a way, but more of a sense of, geez, can I let go or not? Can I get off center stage? Can I hand over the reins here to Jesus, who I really should do that with? I mean, he's the one. And of course, I think I see the Baptist greatness in his ability to do that, and do it so gracefully. Behold the Lamb of God, we find in John's Gospel. This is the Lamb. And then his great self-effacing statements that I'm not even worthy to loose his sandal strap here. This man is great. This is the one we've been looking for. He's the light, the true light who's come into the world. And, I mean, it's a marvelous, it's magnanimous. It's not just a grudging thing like, well, I'll let him get his shot at this, see if he can preach better than I can or gather a bigger following. It's nothing like that, is it?
It's a true celebration, really.
It is, a celebration of handing this over, and finding his own role, I suppose.
What do we know about him after that?
Well, I was just thinking of myself that one of the really important things is that this preaching that he did got him in trouble with Herod Antipas, the son of Herod the Great, who took over in that region, and he chided him for marrying his brother's wife, Herodias. And so that this got the Baptist into great trouble, and eventually he was arrested because Herodias got her husband to do that. She hated John the Baptist because she had challenged the marriage that she was in. And then we have this picture of him in prison at that point. And then the interesting thing, I think, again, psychologically, I wonder what you make of this, but out of prison then, John sends some of his disciples off to Jesus to say, hey, are you really the one or not? You know, what does your novelist's eye tell you about that situation? Just reading, what do you think was going on with the Baptist while he's in prison there? Here he's in this situation. Suddenly, he was so convinced, handed the reins over. Now he's in his dungeon, and the word comes out, hey, are you really the one who's we've been expecting or not?
Well, perhaps he was fatigued and ill and depressed and beginning to doubt whether his own work had been the right work. And maybe that would have been his greatest suffering, to have that kind of
doubt and
crisis.
Confusion, yeah.
Uh-huh.
I must say that's my own realistic reading of it, too. In other words, I see it as an honest question. I mean, some people would say, well, he sent those people out to show them or give Jesus a chance to say something positive or something. But I would think it represents something one could well understand. In the moment of crisis, it isn't all that clear. In this divine-human relationship, even with all the powerful experiences that John had, doubt can creep in. I remember in flashing on Teresa of Avila, she says that the Lord appeared to her and told her to build a chapel or something or do something particular, and a few days later she's sitting there saying, geez, I wonder if I should do that or not. And I think that helps us to identify more with these figures. I mean, I think John the Baptist is a person we could identify with easily, and saying, yeah, here's a man who knew his own confusion and doubt, right? As you said, fatigue, depression. I mean, what happens to a person when you're imprisoned and worried about your life and so on? What kind of strange thoughts come into the mind? What sort of strange thoughts come into our own mind when we're isolated, when we're not getting good feedback, when we don't have the opportunity for discussion in a larger group, when we're just letting our own thoughts run around in our head? Sometimes they just get distorted, get out of line. I suppose that's one reason we need a spiritual director, or a counselor, or a friend, or a confidant to keep us in touch with reality. But I tend to think of the Baptist the way you said, as being, really in doubt and confusion. And, of course, Jesus sends back the powerful message indicating that he is the one who's been expected. He's the one who's going to help the poor and to free the captives and to do all of that kind of thing. And here we have these miracles happening and people being liberated, healed, so that this is the sign of the coming of the Messiah.
And this must have been a great comfort to John to have that message brought to him.
One would think so, because it fit in with his own perceptions, I think, maybe of what the Messiah ought to be like, and so on. And one who would be challenging in one way or another the ordinary ways of thinking in life. So I see the Baptist as a great challenger, a great preparer for the coming Lord, but also a challenger. And then you were asking about, you remember the rest of the story, too, of the Baptist is in terms of finally being done in.
Head on the platter.
That's right, yeah. And again, we see Herodias behind all of this, and so getting her husband to, what is it when he's pleased by the dance of her daughter, and then it's the thing is, well, what do you want? I'll give you anything.